It's 10 o'clock. We're going to start with an opening statement from Doug Phillips here.
Good morning. My name is Doug Phillips, and I represent the Commissioner of Registration in this proceeding, Mr. Pat Gill. This is a time and place that's been designated for the hearing on the voter registration challenge submitted by Maria Rundquist on December 30 of 2019. The statutory basis for this challenge is that Mr. Jeremy J. Taylor is not a resident at the address where he is registered to vote. That address is 3215 Grandview Boulevard, Sioux City, Iowa. The issue to be decided by the Commissioner today, the only issue, is the location of Mr. Taylor's residence as that word is defined by the statute that applies to this decision. As the challenger, Ms. Rundquist has the burden of proof with respect to this issue. And the applicable standard that will be used today is called a preponderance of the evidence. That means evidence that is more convincing than the opposing evidence. Today's hearing will proceed as follows. The challenger and those appearing on her behalf may offer sworn testimony together with any documents that they deem appropriate to this issue. Upon completion of the challenger's presentation, Mr. Taylor, the challenged registrant, and those appearing on his behalf will have that same opportunity. Finally, the challenger and those appearing on her behalf will have the last word, meaning that they may offer any rebuttal evidence that they deem appropriate, so long as it is not merely reiteration of the evidence initially offered, and so long as it's responsive to the evidence offered by Mr. Taylor. At the conclusion of this presentation, the hearing will be adjourned. The Commissioner will review the evidence and render a decision that will be provided to the parties electronically and by certified mail and posted on the website that's maintained by the Woodbury County Auditor. With that, Mr. Gill has some additional comments about the registration process before we begin with evidence.
Thank you. Just wanted to talk about, first about voter registration. It's not often I get to talk about something that I know a little bit about, and I have a captive audience here, so I'm going to take this opportunity to just kind of educate people about what voter registration is. In our office upstairs, we have Steve is the Deputy Commissioner of Elections, Steve Hoffmeyer, and then we have 3 clerks. And what we do throughout the year, that's what people always ask me, well, what do you do the rest of the year when you don't have an election in front of you? And what that happens is that we're constantly maintaining the voter registration database. That's the important part of it. The chapter that we're dealing with today in the Iowa Code is Chapter 48A, and that has to do with voter registration. And 48A1, section, Statement of Intent, it is the intent of the General Assembly to facilitate the registration of eligible residents of this state through a widespread availability of voter registration services. This chapter and other statutes relating to voter registration are to be liberally construed toward this end. What that means to me is that voter registration, we have to make every effort we can to facilitate that process, to make sure that every eligible elector in Woodbury County, if they want to participate in elections, that we go out of our way to make that happen. When you sign a voter registration form, there's a registrant affidavit, and on that it says that I swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that I am the person named above, I am a citizen of the United States, I have not been convicted of a felony, or I have received restoration of rights. I am at least 17 years old. I live at the address listed above. I am not currently judged by the court to be incompetent to vote. I did not claim the right to vote anywhere else. And then you sign that. So voter registration is largely a honor system, is that you swear to this oath when you sign that voter registration card, and you say that this stuff is true. The reason that we're here today is that Maria Runquist, a registered voter of Woodbury County, filed a challenge on or about December 30th, 2019. And when you file a challenge at someone's voter registration, there's a form that the Secretary of State's office prescribes. And the reason for the challenge, it lists boxes, and then you can check the box that you do it. And that form, the challenge form, follows those requirements that you took when you signed the oath. It says, reason for challenge, and there's a box to check before each one. Is not a U.S. citizen, is not at least 17 years old, is not a resident at the address where registered to vote, has falsified information on the registration form, has been convicted of a felony, and voting rights have not been restored, or has been adjudged incompetent to vote. On Ms. Runquist's challenge, the box is checked, is not a resident at the address where registered to vote. This is my 24th year in office, and I've only had to be a hearing officer for a challenge one time before, several years ago. So this doesn't happen very often, but that's why we're here today. And are now going to turn it over to Maria to present her challenge.
Ms. Runquist, if you intend to testify, please approach the court reporter and be sworn. And if I may, I will remind you before you start that the only reason we are here today is to decide whether or not Mr. Taylor lives on Grandview Avenue. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Yes. My name is Maria Runquist, the challenger. On behalf of the citizens of District 2, I am representing the following evidence. On Exhibit A, I have from July 7, 4/19 through December 4/19, there is no usage of water in the house. And I have Exhibit A for an independent source.
May I interrupt? Do you have a copy of that from Mr. Gill?
Yes.
Thank you. No, just one more question. You referred to that as Exhibit A. Is it actually Exhibit 5?
Exhibit A. And Exhibit B, it is the City of Sioux City, Iowa, the Customer Location Consumption History Inquiry. And this is the page 3, Exhibit B.
Thank
Are
you.
you on the right page?
Okay.
I have Exhibit C. This is the house on 5202 Christie Road. Through May 17/19 to December 18/19 water usage. The next page, Exhibit D, and is the water usage history of 3215 Grandview Boulevard versus 5202 Christie Road. On Exhibit E, page 1, it is from the Woodbury County Beacon, and it's the summary of the purchase of 5202 Christie Road home on May 8, 19. Exhibit E, page 2. Where is the sale of the house on May 8, 2019. And purchased by Taylor Jeremy James and Taylor Kim Farm. And this is all the exhibits that I have from the two homes and the water usage, and I include pictures where 52 is his primary residency.
Excuse me for interrupting again. Do you have a copy of these things for Mr. Taylor?
Yes, I have another copy.
Have you given them to him?
No.
Would you please?
Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to call Mr. Dan Greenwald and also Mr. Eric Wisin, who is a resident of the District 2, and he has living on Grandview and 32th Street all his life, more than 30 years. So he will be speaking on the behalf of District 2 citizens and Mr. Dan Greenwald.
Maria, I'm going to ask you to stop referring to District 2. This hearing deals with voter registration.
Okay. So I think that's all I have for you.
Do you have additional questions for her?
Not at this time.
Okay. And who do you want to testify next?
Next, Mr. Dan Greenwald and Mr. Eric Wisin.
Mr. Greenwell, would you come forward and be sworn, please? Please proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Gill, as part of the information that Ms. Runquist submitted, I was the one that actually did the open records request to the city office for the water usage on the properties on 3215 Grandview, and also did the water record usage on 5202 Christie Road, opens records request from the city. Based upon that information, when Mr. Taylor purchased the house at Christie Road in the summer, you can see on Exhibit A to Ms. Runquist's attachment, you can see water usage prior to his purchase of the home and water usage at 3215 Grandview after the purchase of the Christie Road home. There was zero water usage in the July billing, zero water usage in August, zero water usage in September, zero water usage on the October 4th billing, zero water in the November 4th usage, one CCM or 100 cubic feet of water in December, and zero water usage in the period ending January 3rd. So what you can really conclude with this is subsequent to the purchase of his home, there was no water usage, no material water usage at all, which would indicate no one is living there and no one is using water at that location. which in my view, no water equal no residence. And that is what that indicates. I also took a copy of the records on Exhibit D. Exhibit D is a recap of the city water records, just a recap of that, and you can see that there is no water usage during those months that I mentioned subsequent to the purchase of the house on Christie Road. You can also see the information on Christie Road water usage and the significant quantities that were used subsequent to his purchase of that. Also, the record is there for Exhibit E, which is the real estate transaction from the Woodbury County office indicating the date of purchase and the description of the Christie Road house. So all in all, I did the open records request to the city. They provided that open records request. That information is presented here to clearly demonstrate there was no water usage at 3215 Grandview per these records submitted here. And as I said, no water usage equals no residency. How do you live in a house if you don't use water? Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Pringle?
Not at this point.
And I'm sorry, who was next? To please come forward and be sworn, sir. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
She called me Eric, which if you, legal name's Richard Wissing. If you see Eld Richard, I would not respond.
I understand, thank you.
So you go by Eric? Is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay, thank you.
I live at 297 33rd, and for the last year, around the corner since 1989, I've lived at 3303 Douglas. I know Jeremy. I have not seen him in that house. They asked the reason, I haven't seen him probably years, but at least from July on, I have not seen him even drive by through the neighborhood. I'm retired. I guess I'm the guard of the neighborhood.
Where, in regard to...
It was 297 33rd?
Yes.
It's, it'd be like 33rd and Grandview. If you went down Grandview, it dead ends there, you'd run into my house. So it's about 10 houses down from Jeremy's.
So in your testimony is what?
I have not seen him in the neighborhood, anybody in that house, since last summer.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other witnesses? Do you have any other evidence?
Any other documents to support your challenge?
Okay, Mr. Thomas Sani is gonna, I have the papers from that.
Didn't bring any extra copies.
Okay. There's no copies, do you?
We need one for us and one for Mr. Taylor. He had a whole stack there. I don't know if he's got copies for us or not.
No, he said there's not.
Okay.
Can go around there. You have just the one set of documents there?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to let you reference them, and then we're going to have copies made for Mr. Taylor and myself.
Sure. Okay. I have the papers stating that the house he was living in at Grandview Boulevard is 883 square feet with 325 square feet finished in the basement. The house that he purchased out on Christie Road is 2,500 square feet with 1,700 square feet finished in the basement. He does have 6 kids, plus him and his wife. I've got a copy of the mortgage papers that he paid off the day that he bought his new house. And I've got a copy of the mortgage papers of the new house that he bought, in which it states that he is occupying the house as a residency, a permanent residency, or primary residency, and not a vacation or second home.
May I see that document, please? The last one you referred to? Thank you. When you want to talk about this, you pointed that language out. Do you remember where it's at? With reference to your last statement, Mr. Verzani, am I saying that right? That you represented that the mortgage documents indicate that Mr. Taylor would live there as his principal residence. Did I understand you correctly?
Correct.
Do you know whether or not that following phrase, unless the lender otherwise agrees in writing, do you know whether or not the lender has agreed that he doesn't have to?
No, based on the VA loans, the VA loans require to be it is a VA loan, which is the last 2 papers in the documents there.
So your answer to my question is you don't know.
No.
Let me give you this back. I'm sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
I'm done.
You have questions for him? At this point, we're going to take a short recess so that we can make copies of your exhibit, return the originals to you, and make sure that Mr. Taylor has a copy.
Thank you.
So we'll be back to work here in just a moment.
How many copies?
We need one for you, one for Mr. Taylor, and one for her. So we need 3. Okay, we are back on the record. Mr. Vazani, would you come back to the podium, please? Mr. Gill has a couple of questions based on your exhibits.
Yes, I got a response anyway.
So you pointed out the occupancy clause here, and I'm just going to read it so that everybody understands what we're talking about. Okay, number 6, occupancy. Borrower shall occupy, establish, and use the property as borrower's principal residence within 60 days after the execution of this security instrument, and shall continue to occupy the property as borrower's principal residence for at least 1 year after the date of occupancy, unless the lender otherwise agrees in writing, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld, or unless extenuating circumstances exist which are beyond the borrower's control.
Okay.
And at the end of the document, number 25, just above Mr. Taylor and his spouse's signature, said homestead exemption waiver. I understand that homestead property is in many cases protected from the claims of creditors and except from judicial sale, and that by signing this mortgage, I voluntarily give up my right to this protection for this mortgage property with respect to claims based upon this mortgage. Do you know what that means?
I'm assuming that he's turning down the homestead exemptioning, right?
Okay, all right,
I don't know that for sure.
okay. And you said you had something else?
Well, I checked with my son at the bank, and on a purchase loan for a new house with a VA, it is required that the owner has occupancy of the home within a reasonable time frame, usually less than 60 days. In the case of a refinance, it is a possibility that they can not reside in the house with a VA loan. But if it's a new loan that he's never had before on a house, he is required to reside in that house.
Thank you. Maria, do you have anything else too? You've looked at the mortgage, and do you have any questions or any statements about the exhibit that Mr. Desani offered?
No, that's what he said.
Okay. So anybody else, any other evidence that you have to present at this time?
No.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you very much. I'm responding to this voter registration challenge, and I look forward to a ruling on this matter, something I asked for before the challenging petition came. My wife and I first purchased our Grandview residence in 2003. It's our first home as a married couple, where we brought my firstborn daughter home. I'm presenting the following evidence, which clearly establishes my intention to make Grandview my residence. Would like a copy of each entered into the record. I will list them in order and present them in order. All right, driver's license with the Grandview address, my property tax homestead exemption requiring 6 months or more residency, which I fulfilled, my vehicle registration showing my Grandview address, pay stubs from my employment, mail received, AAA, the NRA, charitable contributions, my military certification of legal residency declaration, utility bills addressed to me as owner, a police report taken from a time in which one was monitoring my residence, from which I saw someone monitoring my residence from Grandview. 2018 tax return to the Grandview residence, insurance policy declaration of primary residence, and vehicle insurance. Additionally, I am providing 5 statements from adjacent neighbors on the street, whose statements I would like to be read into the record, and I will also be presenting these. The first is from Toa Nguyen.
Excuse me, Mr. Taylor, before we read those into the record.
Yes.
Would you take a moment and take all of your exhibits to our court reporter and have her mark them so that when you read them, you can refer to them by exhibit number?
I will, thank you.
Thank you.
The first is from Toa Nguyen, 3200 Grandview Boulevard.
Hang on a second.
Oh.
She's got to mark them all.
Okay, sorry. I'm getting a little ahead of you. I'll get them back to you, sure. Thank you.
One more request, Mr. Taylor. When you do read your statements into the record, please tell us which exhibit you're referring to.
Okay.
I promise to stop interrupting you.
No, that's- guide me along the way. Thank you. So we're to the 5 statements from adjacent neighbors on the street, whose statements, mind you, are not all the way down the street or around the corner, but adjacent or within vicinity of the property. The first statements are all 3 the same from 3200 Grandview Boulevard, from Toa and V and Nguyen. And they say these are exhibits 25, 26, 27. I believe Jeremy Taylor to be a resident of 3215 Grandview Boulevard in the neighborhood from which I live. I see him come and go frequently and believe that he resides in our neighborhood personally, by which I mean his place of dwelling. Jeremy sometimes comes and goes individually or with his wife and family. I have seen no one else enter or occupy the residence and believe Jeremy and at other times his family members to be the principal residers of the home. All 3 statements, 25, 26, 27, are identical and signed by each individual. The next statement is Exhibit 28 from Tuan Nguyen, 3206 Grandview, again within close vicinity of the property, and the statement reads the same. The next statement, which is Exhibit 29, which is the house that is directly north to the property, is by Sherry Murphy. This is notarized. It says, I believe Jeremy Taylor to be a resident of 3215 Grandview Boulevard in the neighborhood from which I live. I see him come and go frequently and believe that he resides in our neighborhood personally, by which I mean his place of dwelling. I saw an individual trespassing upon his property, taking photos, and asked him to leave, as I know that Jeremy serves in the military with other commitments, is sometimes by necessity away. Our daughter and son go to nearby Perry Creek. I've stated accurately that we are the sole inhabitants of the Grandview residence. I repeat, it's not rented out to anyone, nor did we sell. We otherwise could have. And so I want to be clear that this issue, in my understanding, the only one contemplated or allowed to be contemplated concerns my residency, not my family's. In other words, the question concerns if I am a resident of the home on Grandview who can legally vote, and I believe the answer should be yes. Previously had two homes, 3200 block of Grandview and the 3000 block of Pierce Street at the same time, which we were back and forth between. And no one challenged my residency nor the right to register to vote based on assumptions. One had smaller or more square footage or the assessed values, which are immaterial to the question. My voter registration is being challenged now because it affects my supervisor's district. We sold the Pierce Street property in late fall of 2018. Our sole home was on Grandview from November 2018 when I was elected until May of 2019. During that time in early 2019, we only had one residence, and at that time, Auditor Gill reported to me that some local Democrats were worried that it was a house that was too small for all of us to be in, an argument that you heard today. At the same time, I had been looking for a home that would better accommodate a family that at times has ranged from 8 to as many as 13 when we have taken in various members of my wife's family. I assured Auditor Gill at the time that the Grandview residence was my family's only home, again in early 2019. That same conversation, Pat and you and I discussed how there have been instances where there have been more than one resident for elected officials that have been signed off by the Secretary of State, leading me to believe that where one claims one residency belongs to the statute. It's something that I believe that I've met. A home became available that we believed ideal for a large family that was not on the market but available through acquaintances of my wife, so I sought legal counsel on the matter and learned I have a legal right to declare my own residency, and I did so at the home in which I was elected on Grandview, and I desired and planned to continue to serve and fulfill those requirements for the office by which I was elected, and for that reason I did not sell, rent, abandon, or vacate the Grandview home except when temporary periods took me away from the home, such as when military or family obligations necessitated, such as a deployment to Romania, travel, or caretaking. I didn't use an LLC, which I have, but instead purchased a property on Christie Road in our own names. More than 6 months ago, on June 19th, I had an inquiry from the county attorney about my family's home situation. I let him and the auditor know that we would maintain both homes, be back and forth between the two. They did not challenge this then, nor indicate to me I'd given unsatisfactory answers to the posed questions. They didn't choose to convene a 3-person panel, as is available and allowable without a petition. In fact, to the contrary, neither expressed further reservations about the situation at the time. In fact, I discussed with Pat on June 25th at 5:00 p.m. and in a follow-up call with the county attorney that took less than 5 minutes, and he indicated that's all I need to know. Again, I made clear my intentions not to give up my residency at Grandview. I have included in the exhibits a police report showing the time that I woke up in the morning, leaving at 6:31 a.m. With my son from the Grandview residence, where we had been monitored by individuals who had otherwise tried to declare that this is not my residence. I stated we are the sole inhabitants of the home to the media, did not get into specifics because sometimes we were back and forth. So for example, in a week I stayed there with my son after his wrestling on the north side of town, another time with my son and daughter who go to Perry Creek when one had chess club in the morning. Another time the family stayed there all together as it's 3 blocks from my folks after celebrating an early Christmas, and another time coming home after a late night on the congressional campaign trail. I stayed there by myself. Is it traditional? No. But neither is our family and our situation, and I don't apologize for that. Additionally, while being protective of who is where and when, given my minor children ages 2 to 16, I took that we were the sole inhabitants of the home as satisfactory, which resulted in being reported as a non-answer. I have met the intent of the law as well by personally residing there, and I am speaking of myself, more than half the year, and currently residing there an average of 4 nights each week. Is it traditional? Again, no. But with the National Guard and County Board and schools and congressional campaign and Iowa House the last decade, we haven't lived traditional lives. You have a neighbor statement from 14, 15 houses away that I'm not there. I have 5 neighbor statements that say that I am. And there's a way to approach this that, given my schedule, I believe that you may not see me there very often. But I believe my 5 neighbors do see me there and have notarized statements that I am. The only determination is where I reside, as again, the only challenge allowable is to my registration. I've been on Grandview more than half the year in 2019, spend more than half of my time and nights there. Regarding the mortgage stipulating primary residency, something that I knew you had been looking at, Pat, there are standard situations and exceptions. The Christie Road home is owner occupied. I called the VA on this and asked, could a spouse and children, and if I was there 45% of the time, is that going to fulfill the intent of the law? And the answer was, there are exceptions and we aren't the residency place. So the intent of the law is it's not a second home, a vacation home, an investment property, and really that's a matter that belongs to the mortgage lender if they would like to come back and they'd like to challenge the fact that my family is there and that 7 out of 8 of us are there 95% or more of the time versus myself individually. We also know that determinations of residency have different applications when it comes to tax and mortgage and voter registration for residency purposes, which is why someone can be in a parent's basement and declare that a residency for voter registration purposes, or a homeless person can sleep in a particular precinct. And so these are different applications. I discussed the situation both before, during, and after the process of purchasing. My wife and children accommodate the primary residency requirement on Christie Road. Having researched this, sought legal counsel with the desire to fulfill my term on the county board, I chose to reside more on Grandview in accordance with the language of the statute, where I have an office, where we have bedrooms, our furniture, despite someone coming to the board and wanting to see that. I provided what I believe in any other instance would be satisfactory evidence: driver's license, homestead exemption, vehicle registrations, utility billing, neighbor statements. And if it's overturned and I can't register to vote there, I believe it'll be unprecedented. I do want to respond. I know that there was a FOIA request, although an attorney from the Iowa Public Information Board had said that that is not publicly made available information. It's been made public, and I'm glad. So all that we have in front of us as submitted as evidence, and I'll just give you a little bit of a timeline. May 29th to June 20th, I deployed to Romania. After coming back for about 2.5 weeks, my wife left for Vietnam. So I will readily admit that for about a month's time, I was in the Christie Road home where it made more sense to take care of my children in temporary situations. So you're looking at August through December. It's inaccurate to say that there's 0 water usage. It's more accurate to say that there were 748 gallons of water usage over 4 months' time. If I'm there 4 nights a week, and I'm there, let's say, over those 4 weeks, that's 16. For 16 weeks, 4 nights, it's about 64 nights. 748 gallons, you're saying that I need to use or expend more than 10 to 12 gallons each time that I'm there. That's all this shows. So taking a shower, having a cup of coffee, I assume flushing a toilet, and doing so would expend about that much usage to December. Although the statute doesn't contemplate water usage in this instance, I believe that this is explainable by the fact that I'm there most of the time alone. I can tell you that on Sunday night, when I spent the night there, and I got there shortly after supper, and I left at 3:30 in the morning for a drill. I did not take a shower then. I believe I had a glass of water, and so that in that instance, it would have been less than a gallon.
Would you help me with the timeline one more time, please?
Sure. May 29th to June 20th, I deployed to Romania. I don't have the exact time my wife left for Vietnam in order to join her family for some extenuating circumstances, but it was early July to August. So for approximately 4 weeks or so, I will readily admit that rather than bringing all 6 children to the Grandview residence, it made more sense for me to reside solely in the Christie Road residence. And so for 4 months' time, for 4 weeks, 16 weeks, being there 4 nights a week, and 64 nights if it's contemplated that I need to expend without irrigation, which I wasn't irrigating, more than 10 or 12 gallons each time, then if that's the preponderance of evidence, then that's what you're to decide. I understand. Other than that, from what's been presented, I won't respond to what otherwise was in the complaint because it hasn't been presented. I just ask that our auditor, as I've known him to be in the past, be fair, consistent, look to the facts and precedents, and most importantly, the law. And I know that there's pressure to be made in such a decision, but believe that what I presented to you today gives me the legal right to vote in that residence, and we have taken great efforts to make sure that I'm maintaining my residence so that I can fulfill my term on the board, from which over 19,000 people elected me.
Is there anyone else that you're going to allow to present evidence on their behalf?
No, I believe that the sworn or the notarized statements of my 5 neighbors and the evidence that I put before you is as exhaustive as I can be. Other than there are times where I've started logging and I've kept video of myself in my own home, which I never thought that I would have to do. But over the last month, have begun to record myself when I've gone to sleep and when I've gotten up and when somebody's been outside of my home, which has made my children feel unsafe. Other than that, which I'm prepared if we want to hook up the television, but because I didn't hear anyone say, I didn't see you on this particular night, for which I would need to play a video back, that's all I have. And I would hope that it would be exhaustive enough to be able to show that I have a residency and that this residence allows me to vote and fulfill my term of office.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
I have a question. The mortgage document that shows your signature, you don't dispute that. You agree that that is your mortgage, that is your document.
That is.
On the water bills, do you agree with that? Is that an accurate representation?
Yes, I believe that from the time to, in those time periods that I use 748 gallons of water. So water bills are billed in CCF, right? One CCF is 748 gallons. So from the time period over those 4 months to have used 748 gallons of water, I don't dispute that.
What I'm looking at from June 4th of 19, there were 6, whatever the units are. And then it goes, so each month there was a reading done. It was 2145, the CCF reading.
Right, correct.
And it went July, August, September, October, and then late October. And then December is when they show 1 actual consumption. The CCF goes up 1 at that time.
Right,
And then
that's accurate.
January, there's no other reading.
I assume they haven't taken a reading yet, but yeah, so what you're pointing to, Auditor Gill, is 748 gallons of water usage.
Okay, over that period of time. So
Right.
you're saying that even though it doesn't show from 2145, that you're saying over that period of time.
Yeah, because of the increment, essentially you're going to, the next reading is going to go to 748 gallons.
Right.
So, yes, from May 29th to June 20th, I deployed to Romania. From July to August, and I don't have the exact dates. I could try to establish them based on when my wife left for Vietnam. But essentially, what I am stating is that for over those 4 months, if you ask barring some sort of meter problem, that I think that it's most likely accurate that I used 748 gallons over those 4 months, which I've established would be about 10 to 12 gallons per time that I was there.
Were you ever contacted by the city as far as, because I know they've done this,
Sure.
is that if water usage is low, all of a sudden they see a spike,
I was contacted.
And what was that about?
It was to know if the meter was still good or not.
Okay.
And so what I said is, in the comparison, I mean, if we're going to compare Christie Road to Grandview, I will tell you the amount of times my kids leave water running, take a bath, and flush the toilet 2 or 3 times, that I fully agree that the Christie Road usage should be about 7 to 8 times as much as the Grandview Boulevard residents. To me, I would be shocked and surprised if it wasn't.
Looking at, yesterday, I pulled I can do a search on our voter registration database, and I can do it by address. And so yesterday, I did it, and there are 4 people registered at active registered voters and 1 inactive registered voter at the Grandview Boulevard. I also did a search at 5202 Christie Road, and nobody was registered there. There's no one registered there.
Is this, can I just interrupt, and is this concerning, because I know we're talking about my voter registration and that and I defer to Mr. Phillips, that the only applicable discussion is to be concerning one voter registration? Is that, my understanding of this is that there's only one voter registration that is to be discussed or challenged?
Your understanding is correct. You are the only voter whose registration is being challenged. I don't know what Mr. Gill's question is, and so I don't know if the 2 of you are on the same page yet.
Okay.
Well, these are public records. They're available to me, and they're challenging your voter registration.
Right.
That's what we're talking about, is your voter registration. But I think this, it goes to the point is that I also want to talk about voter registration and the process that it works, how people end up registered at different addresses. Okay? And so I'm trying to understand how these folks are registered at that address too. Okay. So Barbara Ann Berger, do you know who Barbara Ann Berger is?
Yes, she was someone who rented it in the past from us.
She did in the past. And she, through NCOA, National Change of Address, she is made inactive because every year we participate in the National Change of Address. And what happens is that the vendor mines the data from the United States Postal Service. And then they present that to the Secretary of State's office, sends out a mailing to everybody in the state if we participate, which Woodbury County does. So it comes back is that Barbara Ann Berger, through NCOA, was made inactive because she, the address that came back is, it looks like she is now a resident of North Sioux City, South Dakota.
Okay.
So she, the only reason that she's there is that she was a previous rep. That's all I was trying to say.
Sure.
Okay. Now, I have 2 more. Carla Lee Sohm and Haley Jordan Monroe. Are you familiar with those?
Yes, same situation.
They were previous reps.
Correct.
And they are active registered voters at that address. And they participate in the same program, the National Change of Address. We mail out to the Secretary of State's office, we mail out. If it comes back undeliverable, then we make that address inactive if they've moved outside the county. These, what happened here was these were an address, was a post office box, so it's not a physical address. It's a post office box in Hinton. So they are still listed as active registered voters at that address, but they don't live there.
That's correct. And I can't control, I mean, as you
Right.
know, I have no control over a previous.
Were they
someone's-
renters at one time?
Correct.
Okay. So that establishes it. But they are active registered voters, and your spouse, Kim, is a active registered voter, registered at that address.
I believe that to be the case.
Yes. And so, and how she came to be registered at that address is that through the national change of address, okay, is that we mailed out, and what we do is that the old address was 3034 Pierce Street, and then the new address was 3215 Grandview. That's national change of address. So that's how Kim came to be registered at that address, the same address that you're at, 3215.
Yeah, and that would be consistent with the timeline I've given.
Right. And she responded and signed it, said that this information is correct at Grandview. Okay. So Kim is registered there as an active registered voter. I'm going to refer to as a timeline here for, it isn't, I mean, it goes back to, yeah, when you said registered in 2003 at the Grandview address was your voter registration. But I just want to go back to, because a couple things bounced, and I want to explain how this works.
And I'm sorry, do you mind if I had said that my wife and I first purchased our Grandview residence in 2003. You had said that I had registered to vote in 2003. Is that, I don't know if we
Yes.
need to,
2003 at Grandview, 3215 Grandview.
okay.
Okay. But the ones that I want to visit about is that in 2010, the voter changed voter registration from Grandview to Pierce Street, November 5th. That might have been election day or something. Does that sound right to you?
If you're asking if it sounds right that that was what you have in front of you, that voter registration occurred, I'm not sure the question. If you could ask.
3215 Grandview and 3034 Pierce Street are both in precinct 12.
That's a true
So-
statement.
Yes, and they're in precinct 12, so you would have gone there. And looks like you must have changed your address at that time.
Right, which is consistent. And so I'm glad you're bringing this up, because when everything lines up together, that is helpful. So in 2010, if we moved over to the Pierce Street residence, and you're saying that at that time, our voter registration was changed to reflect where we were principally residing.
And then this is another way that addresses can get changed in the voter registration record, is if you submit an absentee form, that is, and it doesn't indicate that this is a mailing address, we will change that address, and after the election, we'll mail out, say whether it's confirmation of this change. So it looks like in 2014, the residence was changed from 3034 to 3215 because an absentee ballot was requested from 3215 Grandview. And so your voter registration was changed back to Grandview during that period of time. That sound correct?
I believe so.
Okay.
I've-
And then on 2015, we went through the NCO process, and your address was changed back to the 3034 Pierce Street address because of the national change of address. And it remained in effect until March 13th of 2018, when you changed voter registration from Pierce Street to Grandview.
That all sounds complicated, but I think the situation was we were back and forth in between. We were trying to sell the Pierce Street house, and so moved back into the Grandview residence to be able to show a home and not have to clean up everything after 6 kids at a moment's notice for a realtor. So there was some back and forth, and I believe that those timelines I trust are most likely accurate between, whether we were going to be solely at the Grandview residence in order to have the Pierce Street residence show ready or not. But I don't dispute that there were back and forth voter registration changes, nor do I dispute any of those previous renters that had done so at that address. I don't have an explanation for why they're still registered other than they are not living there at this time. But I certainly believe that you'll take that up with them and where they're at right now. And I believe Hinton is the residence. But I'm not sure. I can't speak for them.
I think he's answered those questions.
Okay. Do you receive mail at the Christie Road address?
I believe that there's some mail that has come there, mostly in my wife's name. The vast majority of our mail, or my mail, is received as the exhibits show at 3215 Grandview. If there's something that is inadvertently picked up because of our mortgage declaration or otherwise that comes, it's not through my request.
The NCOA, they're about to embark on that again. Those mailings will go out. And what I'm anticipating is that if you're receiving mail there, is that that same database is going to be mine. And we will go through the NCOA process again. And so what will happen in our office is that the voter registration will be changed to the Christie Road address, and the mailing will go out, and you'll have to confirm or tell us where your actual address is.
And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, Pat, I believe that we followed that same process one time before when I'd gone from Pierce Street to Grandview, and I think we even had a conversation, and you said, where are you and what do you want to do? Do you remember us having that?
Something along those lines.
Right, and so I said Grandview, and that's where we are residing. And I would anticipate in the same instance that if we were to have a similar conversation, that my answer would be the same as concerns me.
He definitely just answered that question. So.
I don't have anything further, do you?
I don't, other than to say I'm appreciative of the process that's in place and the way that this was handled.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to explain another portion of the voter registration process. Why it's important, residency is important. I think that's, besides making sure that people are registered to vote, that can register. The most important thing beyond that, to me, for voter registration, is that we get folks at the right address. Because in Woodbury County alone, I checked this with Deputy Commissioner of Elections, Steve Hoffmeyer, this morning. We had 89 different ballot styles in Woodbury County for the school and the city election. And why it's important, residency is important, is because we want to get the right ballot to the right person where they're voting, where they're voting from, and where they live. The process that we're going through here for voter registration, it gives great weight to the registrant when they register to vote at the place where they want to declare registration for voting purposes. But it also has sections to go through this process that we are going through here this morning. It allows any other registered voter of the county to challenge based on those things that I lined out earlier as far as the residents. And that's very important to them. That's what we constantly are doing. Voter registration with Kim and the other clerks that are up there is we're constantly trying to keep an accurate database of where folks are registered to vote so that we can get them the right ballot. That's what's very important to us. So I just wanted to clarify that process of what we do.
Ready for rebuttal?
Yep. At this time, Maria, a rebuttal.
I'd like to call Mr. Greenwald to the rebuttal.
So you're sworn.
Mr. Gill, Mr. Taylor presented extensive evidence on driver's license, vehicle registration, pay stubs, AAA cards, utilities, tax returns, insurance policy, and the like. Quite frankly, none of that's relevant. The real issue is, where was Mr. Taylor's residency post-purchase of the Christie Road house? He indicated his travel and living arrangements were non-traditional. I would agree with that. What I think he's trying to do, though, is really confuse the issue on dates when his wife was away, when he was away for deployment. Yes, he was away for deployment, so in theory, nobody utilized the house at Grandview. But what I will dispute is his assertion that he only used 10 to 12 gallons of water while he was there. I believe that's absolutely inaccurate. I've done a lot of research on that, and the average use of water is somewhere significantly north of that, and it's all available on public information. They say mostly it's 80 to 110 gallons per day per person. He's not living there the whole day, so it would probably be lower than that. Just taking the average of his lowest 3 consumption months of either of these locations, one being May 3rd through April 4th at the Grandview house, there were 13 CCF, or 1,300 cubic feet of water utilized. And assuming there's 8 persons there, that's 27 gallons per person. He said 10 to 12. Okay, the kids leave the faucets on, they flush the toilet a lot. That's reasonable discussion. What's not reasonable is the 10 to 12 gallons. If you look at all the research, if you flush the toilet twice, that's 2 gallons per flush. If you have a very efficient toilet, that's 4 gallons. Typically, your hand washing, your teeth brushing, and your shaving will take 1.5 gallons. Let's round it down to 1 gallon. So now we have 5 gallons. And a typical 10-minute shower takes over 20 gallons of water. So let's say he's quick. Let's say he takes uses 15 gallons. He's 3/4 the speed of the normal person. You're talking about 20 gallons per day. If he utilized 20 gallons per day, and he's asserted that he lives there 4 out of 7 nights, or 57% of the time, if you do that math on that, he would have tripped over on 1 CCF sooner than he said, and not in December. So I don't believe his information is accurate. It isn't supported by any of the research that's out there on the water usage. And quite frankly, all the other discussion comes down to common sense. What was he doing? Where was he living post-purchase of the Christie Road house? I think common sense would tell you don't buy a $470,000 house, a large house, and move your family down there and then go cross town, other than occasionally. And he just mentioned a few occasions. I do not believe, and I don't believe any information has been submitted today that supports that he lived there 4 out of the 7 days. And the water bill shows 0. And I think that is the primary document that you, sir, should rely on and you should look at. And I think that is the overriding thing. A guy showers, shaves, and goes to the toilet when he lives in a house using no water, or saying I use nominal water that I can mathematically get back to 748. His math doesn't work. Thank you.
Any further rebuttal?
want a closing statement? Can I do it? Okay,
No, this is rebuttal.
it's rebuttal.
It's not a closing statement, it's rebuttal to what Mr. Taylor presented.
Do you have any further rebuttal?
Do you have,
Yeah, can I say something?
yes. If it's rebuttal, what you're doing here, Leah,
Well-
is that what he presented,
Okay.
you're responding to.
Yes, we all took the oath.
Yes.
So he said that he never rented a house. And he shows that he rented.
I think, just to clarify the timeline,
Yeah.
I think what I've established, what I understand, is that there are no renters there. That was Mr. Taylor's testimony. He had previously rented that, and that's why we talked about the voter registration records at that
Okay.
house, is that he stipulated that he previously rented that property out. He lived at a different residence on Pierce Street. But since that, his testimony is that since he purchased the property on Christie Road, that property has not been rented out. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had not anticipated hearing closing arguments, did you? Is there any further rebuttal from the challenger? Are you finished? Yes. Okay. The commissioner had not anticipated hearing closing arguments, and I don't envision that we're going to. I appreciate all of you being so well organized and presenting this in a very efficient fashion. Do you have anything else, Mr. Gill?
Just as far as when you issue a decision, I'm going to get together with Mr. Phillips, and we're going to go through the evidence that has been presented this morning. And it's my intention that it will be posted at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning on our website. That's when the decision will be made, and Mr. Phillips will send electronic to both the challenger and the challenged resident, and by email, and then also certified mail, correct?
Yes.
Do we have any further business?
I think we're ready to adjourn.
We are adjourned.
Good, how are you? Good to see you. There's no range. She was just asking if I've ever seen